Hello and happy almost fall break. Today's topic will be for-profit higher education trends and issues. Let's start off with a bit of an introduction into for-profit institutions of higher education. Functionally, for-profit institutions are owned and operated by an individual or group of stakeholders who make the decisions about university operations, whereas nonprofit institutions are operated by a board of directors who do not have a direct financial stake in the institution. While it may seem obvious, they function as profit-seeking businesses, while nonprofit universities are required to reinvest all revenue into the institution. Most for-profit institutions are nationally accredited, which is a less rigorous process and allows the institutions to operate multiple locations without the geographic limitations that regional accreditations impose. Academically, they typically focus on trade or career skills such as culinary arts, cosmetology, auto mechanics, healthcare, etc. Finally, for-profit credits on average cost nearly twice as much as non-profit credits. For-profit colleges have been around since colonial times in the United States, but really grew in popularity starting in the 1830s, offering classes in penmanship and accounting. They expanded westward from major cities on the East Coast during the 1850s and 1860s, eventually totaling about 2,000 institutions housing over 240,000 students. During this growth, there was a lot of mistrust in these colleges as misrepresentation and false claims became apparent. Some regulations came about, but with the introduction of the GI Bill in 1944, more and more institutions opened to take advantage of relaxed requirements of veterans' tuition grants, growing to about 9,000. The number of institutions and students kept growing until the 85-15 rule was introduced in 1992 that limited programs to receive no more than 85% of funding from VA funding. This was then modified in the 90-10 rule in 1998, which for-profit institution could receive up to 90% of the funding from federal aid, putting for-profit schools on par with nonprofit schools. This led to the expansion of for-profit institutions up until 2009. At its peak, the for-profit sector saw $32 billion come from federal funding, 20% of all federal student aid. 32 billion from federal funding, 20% of federal student aid. For-profits received greater scrutiny under the Obama administration starting 2009, and more negative attention faced this sector, leading to the decline we are still seeing today. Okay, now that we've learned a little bit of how for-profit schools came onto the scene, let's go over some current trends and issues they face today. Our group wanted to focus particularly in decline in enrollment, closings, why these institutions decided to change to nonprofits, and the impact of the federal government having to pay off student loan debt due to for-profit malpractices. For-profit institutions enrollment peaked in 2010 and have since experienced sharp decline in enrollment, and this has led to more and more closures. And there are several reasons why. College students who enroll at for-profits are less likely to complete a program. A study completed by the Center for Analysis in Post-Secondary Education and Employment, also known as CAPSE, really cool organization, did a study in 2011 that tracked in 6 years that in 2017 showed that for-profit colleges 6-year completion rate was at 35%. That was 3 percentage points lower than 2-year public colleges. And public and private 4-year colleges showed roughly twice that percentage in the same 6-year period. Now, with that being said, that shows a lot of unfavorable data, and it's data that continues to mount till today. For-profit colleges are finding it difficult to attract students, and with consistent sharp declines in enrollment have started to close around the nation. You've probably seen some news articles, or even in Colorado, the Art Institute down in Denver just closed a couple years ago. I know our school felt that backlash there a little bit too, with a lot of those students transferring to CSU and trying to manage, transfer credit and time of completion of their degrees. So um, it's it's interesting to see the different models and the different outcomes. Okay, so let's talk a little bit now about how and why for-profit colleges are starting to convert to nonprofit models. Under the Obama administration, like we mentioned earlier, the Department of Education became stricter on for-profit universities due to high tuition rates and an ever-growing national student loan debt. Policies were put in place to draw students to other options to receive a certificate in a trade or to go to a smaller in-state school with lower tuition rates with the same quality education. New regulations put tough standards in place for career training programs to help protect students from being saddled with debt that they probably can't repay. If for-profit colleges did not follow these new regulations, then they could lose eligibility to offering federal student aid to students. An example of stricter regulation put into place was known as gainful employment. To qualify for federal student aid, the law requires that most for-profit programs prepare students for gainful employment in a recognized occupation. A program would be considered to lead to gainful employment if the estimated annual loan payment of a typical graduate did not exceed 20% of a student's discretionary income or 8% of their total earnings. Programs that exceed these levels would be at risk of losing their ability to participate in taxpayer-funded federal student aid programs. So to avoid try and avoid stricter policies and possibly receive more federal and state funding, for-profit colleges are beginning to switch from for-profit to nonprofit models in hopes of dropping their tuition rate, maybe offering more federal aid to better support students. So next, I would like to talk a little bit about the impact of student loans on the federal government and the impact that's been having recently, especially. As for profit enrollment is declining, schools are facing more scrutiny and distrust is growing, and many institutions are closing their doors. Recent closures include Corinthian Colleges in 2015, ITT Tech in 2016, and most recently Argosa University in March of this year. Students enrolled in these institutions at the time of their closings can apply for closed school discharge of their federal student loans, essentially canceling their debt and leading to millions in loan forgiveness. Students are eligible if the institution did not secure an option known as Teach Out for students to complete their degrees elsewhere. So Teach Out, basically, you could take the credits, and if they're transferable, you can go to another college and hopefully complete there. But this is further compounded at for-profits by their credits tacking solid accreditations. So students are unable to transfer those credits. Corinthian colleges closings ended up costing the federal government $200 million, while ITT Tech's totaled $250,000. Even just in 2019, closings cost the federal government $43 million by May. This led to questions regarding the regulations surrounding closed school discharge, and it could end up making it much harder for students to be granted loan forgiveness. It has already led to the elimination of automatic loan forgiveness, requiring students to apply for the discharge. While the increasing cost to federal government is concerning, so is the fact that students who have already missed out on accredited degrees may be required to pay back loans because they didn't know that loan forgiveness was even available. Okay, and now to wrap things up, for-profit colleges have a similar uphill battle in higher education with enrollment and cost, like most colleges do these days. However, for-profits definitely face much more pitfalls and scrutiny for multiple wrong turns taken since, the early 2000s. For one, they're quite expensive, and the data trends have been consistently reporting negative results against for-profit colleges, which does not bode well for their future. For-profit colleges have increased pressure from the public and government and will definitely need to change practices and/or profit models to stay operating. Now, I do believe that most for-profit colleges slash career programs have the right idea of giving alternatives to the traditional kind of schooling. However, it should not come at such a dire cost to the student. And I hope to see these types of colleges change for the better in the future. But we'll see. Thank you so much for listening, and hope you all have a great week. I can't wait to see your videos and read some responses. Thank you. Have a great night.